welcome back to the program. Dan Sixsmith, glad to be with you. And as always, we have great guests for you. So excited to have probably two of the smartest people I know, David Yokelson and Tom Pisello, who are just really, really top of the line experts in their particular field. Tom, of course, is the ROI guy, serial entrepreneur, someone I've worked closely with, actually was very influential in my career, going back a couple of decades or so as I transitioned out of marketing agency into the tech world. And we'll always be grateful for that. And David, I've gotten to know over the years, is a distinguished VP and fellow at Gartner. And so very excited, guys. Welcome.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Kind.
Yeah, love it. So we're going to talk about a lot of fun stuff. Let's get your perspectives on what's going on kind of currently in terms of the state of B2B marketing and sales. I mean, there is just so much change going on today. Companies are, laying off, they're investing in certain things and not in others. AI is upon us. It's yet another shift. We had digital transformation. Then we had the pandemic and the Zoom economy, and now we've got AI, and we're just punch drunk from everything. But Tom, let's start with you. What are you seeing in terms of, B2B marketing and sales, some of the big trends? What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, a couple of things. Subscription fatigue is one of them. It seems like everything is sold as a service. We have a ton of services that you've signed up for personally in business. Businesses have increased their tech stacks enormously and their service stacks enormously, and they've reached critical mass. And we see that in some of the underperformance numbers that are being posted on the street of some legacy kind of software as a service darlings, whether it be Workday or Salesforce or some others that are just putting up numbers that are still good. I mean, they're still growing, but they're definitely, there's been a decline. And I think that it's harder to get these companies, companies are having a harder time getting approved, adding to the stack. It's more about consolidation now. How can we trim that back? Or do we really need all of these subscriptions? During the pandemic, a lot of organizations overinvested. So now we're in that period where there's a divestiture going on, and then there's competing funds with AI, as you mentioned. There is a lot of economic pressure on these buyers. And as a result, what used to be a fear of missing out on implementing a solution, with maybe the exception of AI, is now a fear of messing up. So buyers don't have a lot of confidence to stick their necks out right now to do anything other than maybe easy plays like massive consolidation plays or something like that. Anything adventurous, unless it has AI attached to it, is probably a harder sell now than ever before.
Yeah, and we've been talking about risk-averse buyers for a long time, but now it's really off the charts. They're bringing friends in, and it's a group decision. A lot of these decisions turn into no decision, and they just kind of abort the mission. And it's like, it's not worth it, to stick my neck out. I don't need this stuff that badly. It's kind of what we're seeing. And then, of course, it just makes the selling process all the more difficult. So I think what we've seen in the last couple of quarters is really more elongated sales cycles than ever before, even on smaller deals where you would say, like, come on, guys, 30K, 35K, and we're beating our heads off the wall with 42 signatures and legal and procurement. So really, really challenging. David, how about you? What are your thoughts on the kind of current state?
Yeah, I agree, generally speaking. So just to throw a little bit of data at you, there's business buyer research that we've done that says that functionally deals are taking 17 months. Which and just contrast that with what typically had been an average of 10 months. And then we're talking about, enterprise deal, that sort of a thing. But so, sales cycles are getting longer. Buyers are getting worse. So not only are they edgy, not only are they apprehensive about making a purchase, but they're just not good at it. And part of the reason for that is as the types of buyers have diversified. So, we've been out of the it's just IT buying things for a long time. So you have line of business people, you've got more, like you said, people sticking their noses into the buying teams that are average, whatever size they are, 10 people. And they've never been through buying processes before. So they don't do it well, they don't do it fast. And that just creates havoc all over the place. A shining light, though, amid all of this is something that, Tom, you said, and Dan, you said, and it's, the thing on everybody's tongues is Gen AI. I spend lots of time looking at and talking to people about the product-led growth motion, and often you have free trials as part of that. And the number one technology being put forth in free trials by a major factor is AI. People, or put it a different way, people are taking up free trials more often to get to AI function.
Yeah, I think that is, I do see the fear of missing out, as you said, Tom, with this AI, like, because everybody's like, man, I can't be left behind if this is something. So they're taking meetings. I've seen 2 or 3 or 4 really killer solutions come through the Sales is King community, and I've made a lot of introductions because I think these guys could be like disruptors, like to the outreaches and the big boys. So yeah, completely agree. And David, I agree with you. I think, like, selling has gotten harder, but buying has also gotten more difficult. There's a lot of choices. It's not that easy, even though they say, yeah, I don't want a seller. I want self-service and just, hit the button. But it's tough. There's a lot of choices and, a lot of pressure on both buyers and sellers today. So I think the dynamic is really tricky. And, it's we really, as sellers, we really have to raise our game today, right, Tom? Because, what we're seeing is less face time with buyers. Like, you may only get like one shot at it, a couple of calls. And if you don't differentiate or distinguish yourself, it could be game over, right, Tom?
Yeah, or add value. I think that's the key. I think that when you look at the average number of interactions, it's still pretty high. On the order of about 30 interactions with a vendor to help make a decision. Half of those are digital now, though. So that's 15, but that still gives you 15 opportunities as a seller to interact. There's not a lot of time and every moment is precious, but every interaction has to add value to the decision-making process. Otherwise, you're going to be heavily discounted and you might not earn the right to that next interaction. What I've seen the mistake is, though, is that a lot of junior sellers will think, oh, I've only got one shot, like the Eminem song, right? I've only got one shot. And in that one shot, I'm going to pitch and talk as much as possible and get everything across and see what sticks. A lot of spaghetti at the wall, a lot of talking, and not a lot of value add or discovery or interaction. So that's the only caution that I'd have is, yes, you've got less opportunity. There is much more digital interaction. If you add value and take a value-focused approach to the engagement, though, you can quickly differentiate. You can help the buyer make a better decision. And David, you mentioned, Gartner's got some amazing research in this area, and kudos to you all and the teams there. 17%, that's the amount of buyers' decisions that are seen as high quality from the purchasing groups. So most buyers, when they make a decision, they're immediately thinking, well, maybe this isn't that high quality of a decision that just got made. There was too much compromise. Maybe we didn't have enough time, enough budget, whatever it is. But there's a crisis of confidence in the decision-making today. And that's a 44% decline over 3 years, from numbers that weren't great to numbers that are absolutely abysmal. And I think the other figure, David, is 2/3 of buyers are regretting the purchase.
Exactly.
Yeah. Like before the ink is dry.
There's 2/3 regret. I know it's between 50 and 60% that said, gee, I wish I had spent more time thinking about it. And then there's another element where we talked about transformation before, one of the big buzzwords that everybody used, but there's a big disconnect between CFO and CIO, where 70+% of CFOs say, I don't know what we got out of the money we spent on this set of transformation efforts that we did. So yeah, it's not great.
And in that, though, David, you kind of say, look for the light in this. I think there's a great light there in that, heck, if you as a seller can help the buyer to make a better, more informed decision, to give them confidence, to map it out for them. After all, we're selling how many of these cycles all the time? We've seen the different processes that we go through. We know who needs to be at the table, so they're making an aligned, informed decision. I think there's a lot of value that can be added there in helping with the decision process.
Yeah, sorry, we're not letting Dan talk because it's his
podcast. Honestly, I don't even need to be here.
Who cares? No, but so decision confidence is a huge thing. We often have talked about the role of this, or not the role of the seller, but the tasks and the job changing over time to somebody that helps make sense for the buyer. So the buyers have this onslaught of stuff that they're trying to figure out. They see it online, they hear it in conversation, they talk to their peers, they go to their favorite peer review site. So part of the job of the seller has to be, hey, help them through that, guide them. And then one word that I'm starting to use a lot more that I like is with respect to value, is value affirmation. So when those 15 conversations happen, or the 15 touches, a lot of them are about affirming that, yes, you saw this and this is how it works. This is why it's going to do what you expect it to do. This is why it's going to deliver the outcomes. This is why it'll actually land and be implementable once you pay for it, and so on.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And giving them kind of a taste of what it's going to be like afterward. Bringing in the implementation team or the success org, so they actually know what's going to happen and how it's going to happen. So I love that affirmation. So much to talk about. Let's just quickly talk about marketing, and then we'll jump into value. But marketing is really, like sales, under attack in terms of just performing. There's a lot of turmoil right now. Marketers are trying to figure out, I've read articles where a lot of CMOs feel like they don't have a seat at the strategic table, that they're just being relegated to executors. There was another article in either McKinsey or HBR that CEOs don't understand marketing, and the CMOs feel like they just are not jibing with CEOs. Other companies are removing CMOs and just getting more like kind of direct line demand gen people, since there's so many different aspects of marketing today. But David, what are you seeing there? What's your thoughts on where marketing is going? Someone else said to me, who's going to be coming on, a CMO, they said, we need marketing to ride along with sales now and get way more tightly aligned. Like, when was the last time a CMO was sitting in front of a customer and really knowing what the hell is going on in the marketplace? So anyway, what are you thinking, David?
I'm thinking that's a really frightening statement, because if you don't have a CMO that really understands their customers, then I'm not sure why they're there. I think of the legs of the CMO pyramid, legs of the stool, of branding and market, buyer insight, and demand generation. And you don't, as a CMO, you don't have to be the best at all three, but you certainly have to know how they work, what they do, and where they fit. And to me, one of the biggest pieces of that is, like I said, is understanding your market and your customers. So if you're not doing that, I'm not sure why you're there. But apart from that, and I'll confess to being a bit jaded, after several decades in tech. Tech is probably the best example of a market and misapplication of marketing, or misunderstanding of marketing. You compare tech with almost any other vertical, and we always do things backwards. So we have a bunch of work to do, but again, what does data tell us? Data tells us that CMOs have a really rough time getting their budgets approved. And right after that, the next hardest thing is showing ROI for their investments. So of course, those are directly correlated. And the problem typically is that well, the problem isn't that marketing doesn't have the seat at the senior table or the strategy table. It's because marketing hasn't attached itself to the revenue stream well enough. And so, we hear and you read all the time, MQLs are dead and sales and marketing never align and all this kind of thing. And we've got to move past that. The notion of RevOps is kind of a good idea of trying to get at least the operations elements of those functions in line. And I dispense with the organizational piece of that and think more about the data piece of it. So we get rid of the data silos and we can get everybody thinking and acting and responding or collecting and responding to signals that represent much better levels of intent of buyers, which means that we can have our sellers target accounts more effectively, all of that stuff. If marketing can do those sorts of things the right way, then they get the seat at the table because there's a direct path to what they do and generating revenue. Unfortunately, not typically the case.
Yeah. Tom, how about you? Marketing today.
I've seen, maybe because the job has gotten so much more difficult and multidimensional for marketers, I still see a lot of strength in marketers in marketing operation and demand gen, and a big focus on that. And maybe because it's measurable and the numbers can be reported, that there tends to be this kind of executive focus on that. I still see marketers involved very much in brand. Where I'm seeing the biggest weakness is where I came into B2B and tech is product marketing. I was a product leader. And back in the day, we had very strong product line leaders who knew their customer well, who knew the value proposition, the pain points that were being solved. We could articulate it. We could sit down with sales in a meeting and be great communicators on a business level. And I'm not seeing that being added early enough in a lot of early and growth stage companies. And even in, some of the larger companies, it tends to be not a focus like it was maybe back in the day. And so I do think we have this gap of, or lack of product marketing, a product marketing excellence deficit that exists nowadays. You've got people that could maybe explain the product from a technical standpoint, and a lot of them now are coming from the technical side, but they're not very connected to the business, and they're not having those customer conversations to get the vernacular, to get the messaging and connect the dots.
Yeah. Love it. All right. We're going to get into value in a minute, but I want to go back in time for both of you just to learn a little bit more about you. Tom, so, how did you come up with the ROI guy and when was that?
That was a long time ago. I've been doing value and ROI for a very, very long time. I was a product marketer for a storage company, and we were delivering an enterprise value solution. And I developed this application that would go out and analyze the environment and come back with sizing on storage, kind of how old the storage was, and what could be archived to less expensive storage, so forth and so forth. So the advent of information lifecycle management back in the day, but it used the company's data that you would go to visit, and you'd run the analyzer, it would run it, non-invasive, come back with a prescription, and then you'd press another button, and there was the business case. And so the team coined me as the ROI guy because I was one of the first ones to kind of come up with this concept of being able to go in and, as an enterprise seller, run the utility, communicate the pain and the ROI. And so the team named me that, and it stuck. And that was 35 years ago. It was a long time ago.
Wow. That's great. And then entrepreneurship and all that. When did you start to think that was more of your thing versus corporate? Yeah,
I had always been from very young kind of an entrepreneur. It was just in my blood. And I had done wedding bands, and I was a Long Island wedding band musician. And it's kind of like the movie The Wedding Singer, honestly. Although I wasn't the singer, I was just the keyboard player. Anyway, so, through music and through that, I had kind of gotten a bug of wanting to do my own thing and perform and kind of do that. And, entrepreneurship, I worked for a great entrepreneur who owned that storage company that I was mentioning. Tim and Allison Knapp. The company was Maynard, which eventually, through the legacy, became Symantec. and Veritas at one time as well. So I had the bug from being a musician and kind of being an entrepreneur in that industry, wanted to translate it into tech, then got mentored by Kim and Allison Knapp and this great company that they built, and caught the bug. And when I did this application that was just there to help me sell what I was really trying to sell, that application took off more than what I was trying to sell. And so this artifact, I started to get requests for it. And I eventually wound up spinning that out as my first company at 30. 30 years old is when I left and did that, and never looked back. I've been an entrepreneur ever since.
That's great.
You're one of those guys where, you know, I look at my life and realize how little I've done with it. That's
not true, David. Not true at all.
Somebody before this said, Dan Sixsmith, the man, the myth, and the legend. I said, I feel very myth-like these days.
A lot more myth than legend. Yeah, I feel the same way.
Jesus. But how about you, David? What were some of your early aspirations when you were a kid? What did you want to be when you grew up? And did it somehow translate into what you're doing today?
Not exactly. My wife now laughs at this. I want to be a garbage man when I was little. So I was enthralled with the garbage truck going through the neighborhood. I had a toy motorized garbage truck. I would fill it with stuff. That was my dream for a while. Then skip a few years, and I wanted to be an ophthalmologist. Unfortunately, I understand that requires a lot of studying, they call it.
Some schooling.
And that didn't really work out either. And I kind of discovered way back in another day computers, and kind of got into that and did a huge turn. And then decided I did a ton of programming. I created a graphics generator in Fortran, which, if you know, Fortran is not exactly a fun thing, but decided I didn't want to program, and ended up accidentally in what we would now call product marketing. I don't think it wasn't called that then, but was in a series of roles like that subsequently.
And then over to Gartner, where you've had an amazing run. How many years there?
Well, it depends how you count. You could call it 28 years, but it's
with
not
a little
exactly.
hiatus,
so it's
right?
been in three times.
A couple of hiatuses.
I was with a company that was acquired by Gartner in 2005, left, went to a large 3-letter acronym company for 7 years, which was a fantastic learning experience and an interesting set of people. Came back to Gartner in 2015 or so, left for a year, went to private equity, did product marketing across the Vista portfolio, and then came back to Gartner, where I'm here until they pretty much dragged me out, I think. And that's where I got my not my value education, but raised interest and created a huge focus here on that through a whole bunch of research and whatever things we do here to generate data and figure out why people do things. And the last thing I'll say before I give you the mic back is, Tom, you're the apocryphal example of how value gets established and spread in most organizations, which is someone comes up with a cool thing, usually a spreadsheet, it wins deals, and it goes viral. And suddenly you have to be in 1,000 places at once. So nice to see the real world bearing out the research.
Yeah. Sometimes we wish it was a little more orchestrated and purposeful and roadmap than that.
We're trying.
That is the way that it is done a lot of times.
Oh man. So let's get back into value, which is our main topic. But like with all the buyer studies, with all the research, why is it still so hard, Tom, to get, obviously we love our value engineers, they get it. Why is it so hard to get the sales leaders and the sellers to buy into this after really years and years and years of the buyers saying, this is what we want?
35 years. There's a lot of gray hair on my head because of it. That I've been trying to get, a market and mainstream and everything else. The numbers, let's take a look at that. We just did a study, 100 B2B technology companies, value selling, absolutely having tangible impact. 96% of the companies are measuring it. here are just some of the numbers. And these are on the low side compared to some of the case studies that Dan and I have done, like on MediaFly customers. So 48% improvement in win rate, 35% increase in deal size. And David, you spoke about it now being a 17-month sales cycle. What if you could reduce that 25%? Well, that's what they're saying is the measurable result. But here's the kicker, is there's low adoption. So despite those clear advantages, only 19% of sales reps and 19% of the pipeline consistently have value applied to them. Now, we know that could be lower, down around 10%. We also know it can be much, much higher, around 60%. And so there's still this resistance. And I think it goes back to learning and neural pathways. And a lot of times you think you've got that one shot with the customer. You want to talk about the product as much as possible. It's hard to change behaviors. And there were definitely some bad habits that were learned through the go-go years of, the pandemic and the buying, where I think people are just used to taking an easier route. And a value approach can seem like it's a slower approach. In performance driving, we used to teach this, where when you've got a tight corner, you think you want to go in fast and come out fast, and the faster you go into the corner, better you're going to exit. It's the opposite. Go in slow, get that car turned, and then when you're facing the right direction, that's when you nail or smooth onto the pedal to kind of accelerate out. So slow in, fast out, and that's the antithesis with how a lot of salespeople like to operate, which is I've got to shorten this down, I've got to go in quick, and I've got to come out quick, and it just doesn't work that way. So we find that it really requires an orchestrated approach. And David spoke of this. Hey, it's a lot of times in an organization, value is a smart product person or field person comes up with a spreadsheet, they go and roll it out to sellers, and then their day is just filled. Think about just how narrow of a scope that is for the total pipeline and the amount of reach that they can have. So it takes a much more orchestrated approach to actually have value execute well. Value engineers, absolutely vital. The organizations with better value engineer to sales ratios, in other words, lower ratios where there's less sellers or there's better coverage of value engineers across the sales team, they've got some of the highest adoptions. But we know that's expensive and can be hard to scale. So a lot of organizations implement value automation and tools and software to help. So that's absolutely a thumbs up. But then we have to remember that there's change management involved. And you have to make sure that value enablement occurs, making sure that sellers know you got to do this early with discovery, not just later in the process. Making sure that the sellers are trained and they're skilled and they have guides and they have storytelling and messaging to deliver. And then to me, the business value engineers, again, are the key here, where if we can get them to be, not to be thought of as a business case factory any longer, but thinking of true value engagements and getting them to enable the sellers as evangelists and drive along earlier in the deals could be a great asset as well to bump up that adoption and get value ultimately to more of the deals. And really almost every deal nowadays at the enterprise level requires it.
Yeah, for sure. David, do you have anything to add on that one?
I do. I wish I had recorded that, because that was the treatise on how to deal with value. I mean, just to add on to it or pile onto it, so my entire world is tech. And all the clients that I deal with on a daily basis are all tech companies of every size, from zero, even pre-revenue, all the way up through the $1 trillion value companies. And I like to talk about the problems in tech. Tech companies traditionally typically have a lot of hubris about their product. We've built it. It's the greatest thing since sliced bread. Everybody needs one, and our feature, function, speed, feed, whatever is so amazing. Who could not want it? And so as a result, everybody. Most companies and most sellers and most tech companies get into bad behavior, and because it's easier, just like you said, Tom. It's much easier. As complex as products are, it's much easier to remember the list of it does this, it does that. This is why it does this one better than that company does, all of that. It is much harder to get in the mind of your customer and understand them, understand the buyer personas and what they're saying and doing, what they prioritize, how they make decisions, all of that. One of the, it's a little disheartening, but, gives us a lot of work here, which I guess is good, that one of the things we spend lots of time with our clients on is what I would consider product marketing basics: segmentation, ideal customer profile creation. The things that if you do it right and you put the results in sellers' hands, they're going to win deals. It makes it much easier for them. And yet, what we find, particularly with the less mature companies, is we have to coach them through. It's a good thing to do, and here's how you do it, and all of that. The other thing I think is interesting is that there are words that are now popping up a lot more that we heard for the last decades ago. So outside in, I keep hearing this repeatedly, and it's the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to have an outside in view of why does your customer want this thing, not why is this, what is this thing and what does it do and how does it compare? And then the word solutions is also re-popping up quite a bit more, which again, carries a benefit with it. If I'm thinking about how this is going to help my customer, what outcomes will it help them achieve, all of that, then I'm in the right frame of mind.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, the problem is doing this is a lot of work, which parenthetically is partly where Gen AI is going to step in. For example, how can sellers be coached to ask the right sorts of discovery questions? Or if they're talking to someone in a vertical market they have no familiarity with, can they hit a few buttons and say, well, here are the value drivers that go along with this thing for this market? So, things get better, but it's the change management. Like you said, you still have to convince people to put the discipline in place to do things in that manner. And it's still hard to do.
Yeah, I do think there's an opportunity for small language model kind of programming of those AI tools as well. So I think there is going to be some great technology that really helps kind of guide, co-pilot sellers in their engagement, marketing when they're trying to write outreach and prospecting. Absolutely.
So let's talk about post-sale value, because we only have 8 minutes left. I wanted to get each of you to talk about what you're seeing out there. I think someone said the other day that, what do they say? Renewing customers is the new demand gen. It's like, it's really, really important. It's getting way more difficult. I think, Tom, you had some numbers on percentages around that, but, and what we're seeing is that, yes, it's important. Everyone has a different flavor or a different way to go about it. But, what are you guys seeing, Tom? You're working with customers. You have your own framework around it, but tell us what you're seeing.
Yeah, you're spot on. 26% decline in renewal effectiveness over the past 3 years. 13% over the past year alone is what's been measured. So and that's the worst it's ever been over a 12-month period. So we're definitely there. I think the good news is that it seems to be turning a little bit, but it's still going to be a bumpy road. And those organizations that dedicate themselves to a renewal motion that's better will be the winners that come out the other end, because that's the revenue leak that you've got to stop. Some of these
proactively too, right, Tom? Versus
exactly.
So waiting until they get to the end of the road and the CFO, they're about to pull the plug, and then you lob something over the wall, as a desperate,
as a Hail Mary. Hail Marys, they make for great highlights, but there are very few of those that are actually successful from a strategy standpoint. So you've got to have an outcomes-based kind of approach. We like to use a methodology called GROWS to drive the quarterly business reviews, make them quarterly value reviews or regular value reviews with customers, whatever that cadence may be, and have it be proactive where you're discussing and reviewing the goals that you had. So reinforcing that because why did we do this in the first place? Reflect on the success or not. So that's where kind of the typical adoption usage metrics, any triage issues come into play. But very important after G&R in the OWS, the GROWS model, is outcomes and wins. outcomes of the tangible, quantifiable impacts to KPIs. And if you can get it to dollar figures, all the better. And then wins are really important. So the anecdotal quotes from users, quotes from customers, the emotional connection is important, because the people that you're going to be wanting to rely on this to maybe make that renewal decision are very far removed from that stack and the use of it. And then S is strategy. What's, showing the company that you're thinking about their business and have a go forward plan to get better outcomes and get better wins and on today and the goals we have today, but also address the goals for the future and have kind of an expansion case to be made as well. So that's what we think customers should be implementing. Customer support is under a lot of pressure to change right now. The good news is almost every leader we speak to knows it and are starting to put the plans and tools and assets and storytelling in place to kind of accomplish this.
So a lot of qualitative in addition to quantitative.
Yes. Yeah. And
as part of this,
by the way, is the
here.
other anecdote here is it doesn't have to be as complex as the pre-sale. Post-sale needs to be simple, simple, simple. Because they're not, whoever's going to review it is not as involved as that pre-sales buying team. And
it may not be even be the same people.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right.
Yeah. David.
Yeah. Well, only like 4 minutes and there's like an hour of stuff to talk about in here.
We're going to have part two. We'll have you all back.
Awesome.
We'll have you back.
No, so
we needed 2 or 3 hours for this. We were going to do like one of these acquired.
So
we could do a
one,
Joe Rogan
4.5 hour stuff.
4 hour Quentin Tarantino.
Who's listening for that amount of time unless you're driving cross country?
Nobody.
Go, David. Sorry.
All right. So here's the challenge. I agree with every bit of that. And so, the discipline has to be in place from customer success through account management, through whatever. The problem is that, the QBRs still often end up being guessing games or, did you do this? Did you implement that? Did you see this happen? Did that happen? It's really hard. What if you could have a real-time running dashboard that based on metrics you'd established on the way in and based on and we're talking about products here. So based on the adoption of those products and their use with respect to particular use cases, you could tie the metrics of success or the outcome metrics to the usage and then spit out, hey, you actually saved 18%, or you drove this much revenue or reduced risk, that kind of. That is the chalice that I think we want to head for, the grail. That's the word I wanted, that we want to aim for. It's really hard to do. In fact, I would say a handful. There are exactly 3 companies that are doing stuff like this today. And it's still hard to do even at that. And it's really hard to do at scale. But I'll pull a page from the PLG book for a minute and say that, the right thing to do in a product-led motion is track your users, understand what they're doing, tie that to what people call a product qualified lead, which is basically, just think of it as a use case to be simple about it. If they're executing that use case, it means they're seeing value from the product. Well, okay, now take that and tie numbers to it and do it with your existing customer base who are sitting there using the product. One thing people have to get over is that adoption does not equal value. It's a big issue in lots and lots of cases. Just because they're using it doesn't mean they're getting value from it. But when you can tie the metrics to it, then you can be in a situation where you don't have to guess every time. You can say, hey, not only do you have these many people using or these cohorts of users that are doing this and that, but this is actually what you're getting from it. And it's been successful. Wouldn't you like to buy more? That's where we want to go.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Are there any numbers on those 3 companies that are doing it well? Do they have, way more success?
Not yet. So let's say, the one that actually has generated numbers from it doesn't have them precise yet, but they're seeing success. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess what I'd say is they're focusing that effort on their major strategic accounts that also have the wherewithal to manage this stuff. So, but I expect we'll see a decent return from that very, very soon.
And David, that's the big gap too on customer success is what are the metrics? How do you collect them? So the buyers even know what the metrics are, right? So
Right.
that
Right.
closes the gap by
Yeah.
having that value instrumentation. And even if there
Yeah.
is some manual work to convert that into ultimately a presentation or something else, have at it.
You
But
bet.
you do have to start instrumenting the solution for value.
And either way, whether it's a technical solution or you're handcrafting it, the buyers don't do it. They should and they don't. They're bad at it. You as vendors, you have to help them.
You got to do it
whatever way
right
you can.
for them, or it'll never work. All right, guys, this was a tight 45 minutes. Really, really appreciate both of you. We'll do a part 2. There's so much more to talk about. We'll have you both back in a couple of months to see how we're doing. But David and Tom, thank you very much for joining us. Great conversation, and thanks for tuning in, everybody. We will see you next time on Sales is King. Peace.
Thank you.